When I think of villains in Batman Beyond, my mind immediately jumps to a long overarching villain like Blight. My mind then would jump to somebody, more seductive and dangerous as Ink. Then, of course, you've got people that touch me personally, story-wise, in a character like Golem. And then there are obviously the characters that are freaky, think Vance's AI, or the dude from Earth Movers. But in all of that and all of the wash of a ton of brand new characters being introduced to the Batman mythos, we tend to overlook a few. And in my opinion, Shriek is by far the most underrated villain in this show. Now, before some people come at me with some deep cut villain from this show, I want to make it clear that I'm choosing a character that appears in multiple episodes. Otherwise, I would have picked somebody like the dude from Earth Movers, to be honest with you all. But I'm picking somebody that appears in multiple episodes, that has a really cool power set, that has a unique connection to Terry, and is ultimately just a really dope villain. And in my opinion, Batman Beyond's most underrated villain is Shriek. And I want to talk about him today. Sound in and of itself is already a pretty underrated power, whether that be for heroes or villains, but it's the idea that sound can be weaponized in such a way that Shriek does that makes it so interesting. Because especially as a kid, I hadn't really seen a villain weaponize sound the way in which he does. Throughout his 3-episode appearances, he uses sound every time in a very unique way, which provides a different challenge for Batman each time. It's a lot of fun to see and allows the writers a greater freedom in playing with how we listen to things. Because as Shriek says it best, sound is one of our most underrated sensory attributes. And now a word from our sponsor, which is me today. So if you're liking the video, please leave a like. It'll help push this video a lot. Anyways, back to your regularly scheduled program.
It's a neglected sense, hearing. And it shouldn't be. Because all too often our first warning of danger is sound.
And I mean, as far as villain intros can go, how much better can you get than scaring the main villain of the show shitless with nothing but the sound waves you're producing, like convincing him you're a train that's about to hit him or an angry tiger. It was an absolutely great setup to show us Shriek in the unique ways that he was going to use sound as a power and tool to manipulate. And also, I mean, just look at the costume. For me personally, I find the costume to be absolutely sleek, and I love it, and as well, it low-key reminds me of Ultimate Echo Echo, who I have a lot of bias towards liking. But outside of that, I find Shriek's design to be awesome, even if he himself looks a little rough. But hey, not every inventor is going to be looking too good, especially somebody that is creating sound wave inventions and building whole new things. Shriek, much like most creative minds, is unfortunately beholden to the capitalistic society we live in, which dictates that unless his invention is going to make a ton of money, he's never going to get the funding that he needs in order to create what he wants to. And so he has to turn to Blight in order to get funding, as Blight bought the company that he was originally associated with and has continued along his research for the sole purpose of having an asset on hand. And now he needs that asset, as Bruce Wayne is trying to campaign for Wayne Industries, or like Wayne Powers Industries is what it's called in the series, yeah, to keep a hold of the Gotham's old district, essentially where we see a lot of the time in B-Task going down and where Bruce saw his parents get gunned down. He wants to keep it and keep a part of Gotham's history alive and restore it. Blight doesn't want that, he wants to build a shopping mall, so he sends Shriek as Shriek, geez, the S and the S is kind of crazy, to ultimately defeat and kill Bruce Wayne. And when a direct approach doesn't work because Terry's obviously there to stop it, he tries a far more creative approach, and one that is entirely scary. He ends up using sound waves to speak to Bruce Wayne, a one-way transmitter implanted in one of his bandages, and in order to convince Bruce that he's going crazy, he is continually speaking to him and telling him to do horrific things to himself, acting as a voice in his head, one that only Bruce can hear because the two-way radio transmitter is like in his bandage, so only he can hear it. And it's genuinely one of the creepiest and scariest ways I've seen a villain try to kill a superhero. He's essentially trying to coach Bruce how to commit a word I can't say on this platform.
Open it. Open it. Open it. Open it. Open it. Open
But of course, Bruce in his Tibetan monk training would never be so easily convinced, and although he gets pretty close to doing it, he is ultimately trying his best to fight it off. But he looks like a kooky old man, and it doesn't help that he was already arguing with nurses and throwing shit well before Shriek started talking to him, just because he's a cranky old man and probably has CTE. Either way, Bruce is restrained and put into the psych ward, and if you had voices in your head telling you to do the same thing as Bruce, they'd probably throw you in there too. And that's when Terry has to do some detective work in order to not only get Bruce to stop going crazy, but also figure out what Shriek is up to next. And it's in this scene that we kind of just learn Shriek, for the most part, is a pretty normal dude. I mean, he got a free pizza, let the pizza boy hang with him, and explained his entire life's work to the kid. He's not exactly your prototypical villain. He's really only doing this because Blight asks, and, well, Blight pays the bills, so therefore he's kind of beholden into whatever Blight feels like doing for that time of day. That is until Terry starts asking too many questions that would make way too much sense for somebody as a pizza boy to know. But hey, it's Terry after all. He's not exactly the brightest or the best at detective work. And during this entire little scuffle that they have, Shriek accidentally outs himself as being Shriek, and technically he hasn't gotten that name officially, but man, it's a lot easier for me to say that than Shriek the whole time, and then I get confused and all that fun stuff. But either way, we learn Bruce is in the psych ward. Shriek unfortunately outs himself as being a supervillain and now can't go back to having a regular sort of life, and it's all thanks to that kid, who he doesn't seem to care about at all. He only cares about getting Blight, and then eventually Batman, because Blight asks him to. And again, Blight pays the bills.
Shriek, not a friendly name, I grant you, but take it from me. It's better to be feared than loved.
I should probably also mention here that Terry finds out that because of the technology that Shriek showed him when he was hanging out, that ultimately it was Shriek talking to Bruce, and he rescues Bruce from the little psych ward that he's in, I guess. Either way, they end up fighting, and it is one of the coolest fight scenes of the show, especially up until that point, because this is only like episode 7 or 8. I can't remember the actual production number of episodes, but either way, one of the coolest fight scenes I have ever personally seen in a comic book cartoon occurs, because Shriek is able to turn off all sound in the surrounding area. Meaning, the only sound that's being amplified and not canceled out via sound wave bullshit is Terry's footsteps. So for the entire fight, all we're hearing is Terry walking around and a little bit of background music they eventually throw on. But to me, that was one of the coolest applications of his power, especially in the middle of a fight. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. But Shriek, at the end of the day, has to lose as he's a villain, and gets the ultimate form of payback, which is to take away the very sense that he has based his entire life around, and the very sense that has helped him into really dog-walking Terry throughout a lot of this episode. And with Shriek taken care of, that means that Austin Powers gets completely outvoted when it comes to restoring and keeping that portion of Gotham Batman spent so much of his time in, and ultimately all's well that ends well. It was a really great introduction to a very unique villain, not only in look, but in the style of power that he had, and something that I thought was a great addition to the Batman mythos. And it also gave us this absolutely awesome soundbite.
The voice kept calling me Bruce. In my mind, that's not what I call myself.
What do you call yourself? Oh yeah, I suppose you would. But that's my name now.
And then we don't see Shriek for a little while. That's mainly because the first season of this show is exceptionally short, or at least what they say the first season of this show is exceptionally short. And the next time we see him is in season 2. And the entire premise around Shriek's attacks and the way in which he's going about destroying things this time is a variety of ways. He's really amping up, and in my opinion, really utilizing sound to its full potential. So first he starts to enrage all of the animals throughout the city using special sound waves in order to get them to all go haywire. All of this, mind you, he is doing outside of a tower that's shaped like a tuning fork, which is absolutely hilarious, but a little besides the point for right now. He's essentially getting every animal in the city to go crazy using sound waves, something that is seldom thought about and would later be completely reused for a plot that involves Penguin in the Batman 2004. That's not really relevant to this video, I just thought I would mention it. And also not completely relevant, but kind of crazy, Terry fights a gorilla in this episode. So much crazy shit happens in this show, it's honestly hilarious. And then the next attack that Shriek decides to do is to absolutely ruin the ability for people to
Maybe he found some way to Pradish dash Pergrana.
What? You're not making Ursino. Cordytiotoxin?
Terry, what's happening to you?
speak. I mean, that's gotta be one of the craziest things you can do with sound waves as a villain. Take away our, as humans, #1 collaboratory method of handling anything. Think about the chaos that you can cause when you take away the ability for people to speak to one another. I mean, they even have it in the Bible, which is presumably where this episode gets its name from. Hence, you know, Babel, it's referencing the Tower of Babel with distorting people's voices and changing languages so they can't speak to each other, making it harder to fight Shriek. Again, just really cool reference. And we also get to see that Shriek now is deaf, and he also has a tuning fork that acts as a pleasure center stimulator for the brain. You see, that probably would have saved his research, and that probably would have sold a lot, and he probably could have funded the rest of his research off of that. But that is completely besides the point. I also would like to mention that Shriek got let out of prison on good behavior, to the best of my knowledge. Like, he was let out of prison. He could have led a normal life, but no, he's doing all of this, all of it just so he can mess with Terry and fight and kill Batman to get revenge. I mean, dude, you just made it so the whole city can't even speak to each other. And of course, to top all this off, he has one singular demand. Bring me Batman. Batman surrenders to him and the whole city goes back to normal. And of course, the current police chief commissioner, who is Barbara Gordon, who also has an extremely strained relationship with Batman, which may or may not be due to the fact that she was going to have a kid with him behind Nightwing's back and had a miscarriage. Can't remember if that's canon anymore to the DC universe, but you know, well, DCAU, so animated universe, but either way, the two aren't on the best of terms, so she's low-key asking Terry to, like, just turn himself in, you know what I mean? And for once, Bruce is genuinely like, just take me. I'm Batman. You know how much Terry does for this city, and you want him to turn himself in? I actually thought this was a really cool scene, and it ties directly back to the beginning of the episode where Batman was talking about sacrifice and how he was willing to sacrifice himself without knowing Robin could ever save him, and now Terry's put into a similar position. As far as writing goes and character work goes, this episode is by far Shriek's strongest. Not only does he show off his powers in a unique and cool way, but also the narrative itself is just arguably better for this episode. And that's also just supported by the fact that Batman Beyond really got into a groove of its own by season 2, relative to like its first season, which is at times a little weird in the characterizations of certain characters. But at the end of the day, it's just a really, really great conflict to put Terry in the middle of. And ultimately, even without knowing how to beat Shriek, he decides to sacrifice himself for the city, and we get, again, a really dope final fight scene between Terry and Shriek. Shriek, now having complete mastery over his powers, being able to do newer and better things due to the fact that he's in a tower that quite literally channels every single ounce of sound that he's putting out there in a tuning fork shape. Can somebody who actually works with sound waves check me on this in the comments? Because there's not a chance in hell that that would work, right? Just because the building is shaped like a tuning fork, it wouldn't produce extra wavelengths, right? I'm completely open to being wrong here, but it just doesn't, I don't think it makes sense, and it kind of bugs me. And I know of all things to bug me, it's the fact that the sound waves don't move right. Just suspend your disbelief. But I'm genuinely curious, and I can't really find anything about it online because, well, I doubt anybody's actively cared enough to look that up. Anyways, back to the cool fight scene between Terry and Shriek. The two characters once again have a pretty decent fight, but this time instead of demystifying the sound and trying to attack Terry while he can hear him and Terry can't hear anything, instead he amplifies all of the sound around him to do what Terry did to him and essentially deafen him. But Shriek is the only one in the city unaffected by this because he is deaf, so using his disability as a benefit. I thought that was really cool. Even if it's on a villain, the idea that he could use his disability to be a benefit while going forward was actually really cool. I just think that's dope. Either way, he is actively trying to fight and destroy Terry, but unfortunately, it would become the very advantage that he gave himself through his disability that would lead to his downfall, as he believed Terry was just arrogantly prattling,
No use pleading, you're dead.
As the tuning fork building falls. But unfortunately, because he couldn't hear it, he ends up getting completely buried under it. Again, another very ironic end for the Master of Sound, as he's dubbed himself. But as of currently, that's where he ends for now, at least. If you don't see a character die on screen, then they're not dead. That's the entire rule of thumb when it comes to any source of media. So, Shriek will be back. And of course, with having such a great outing in this last episode, his third appearance should be wonderful, right? No, it's genuinely horrible. Like, okay, horrible's being harsh, but it's my least favorite of the three appearances, as we get so little of Shriek in this episode in general. And it's far more focused on a character that I can understand but am often annoyed by, and it all begins with Terry, unfortunately, trying to follow Shriek's little assistant. You might have seen him from the previous episode. Didn't mention him because he doesn't really matter. He just kind of helps Shriek, and Shriek's just a dick to him, just to show how evil he is, especially relative to how he was in the previous set of episodes, where he was just a pretty normal dude who just needed his bills paid. Either way, Cherry finds himself completely trapped inside of the train station in Gotham, and that leads to Max and Bruce Wayne reluctantly teaming up to go find him. Bruce doesn't really want to team with Max because she's a girl that's a teenager and the life is dangerous. Go watch my Young Justice videos if you want to hear me prattle on about how dangerous superhero life is. Either way, Terry is trapped underground and happens to meet... Listen, I don't have a lot against this character because I can empathize with him and, well, sympathize with him, and I can, understand why he acts the way he does, but that doesn't make him any less annoying. It's just a punk-nosed kid who is like, Batman's bad, supervillains are cool because they do whatever they want, and he spends the entire time arguing with Terry and just kind of being a jerk. All while Shriek is literally trying to kill Terry in the most creative way he's come up with yet. And that is by channeling his sound waves into miniature sonic booms that cause the tunnel to collapse. Again, we're seeing a brand new use of his sound powers. Untapped potential with a superpower like this. There is a million different ways to use it that I'm probably not even thinking of. And technically he doesn't have the superpower. It's a suit, it's technology, but it's still so awesome. This episode, in my opinion, is really hampered down by the fact that we're following three separate plots. The A plot being Terry with the ungrateful little kid. The B plot is that Bruce Wayne and Max are trying to find Terry, and so they're teaming up and having their own little fun side shenanigans. And the third part is obviously Shriek and his plot to destroy Batman Beyond, but he's like doing a bad job of it and we barely see him. We get a lot more of the A and B plot, and Shriek is treated almost as though he is a nothing burger or a villain of the week that Batman has beaten so often by this point, he's irrelevant, especially to being a big part of the plot. Which is unfortunate because he's such a cool and unique villain, and it just helps to lead to the credence of him being underrated, as by this point in the show, mind you, we're still only in the second season, which I know the second season of the show is pretty long, but for him to already be cast aside and treated as a lesser villain, and we see that the T's are considered more of a viable threat against Terry and Batman than this dude is, to me is ridiculous. I also wasn't like the biggest fan of the side plot between Max and Bruce Wayne. I love Max as a character. She's one of my personal favorites from this show, but her and Bruce for this episode just kind of bored me to tears, and I really would have rather spent more time with Shriek. But hey, I didn't write the show. And the kid who is annoying, again, I can put myself in the shoes. I can see why he acts the way he does. Life has given him nothing, so he's bitter against it and everyone that is supposedly good. But ultimately, he just came off as really annoying, unfortunately. And he also gets kidnapped by Shriek, which is pretty funny. Now, I do actually want to take some time to acknowledge something with Shriek, because this is the last time we get to see his character in any meaningful way. And that's just how far off the deep end he's been flung. I mean, in this little scene right here, he couldn't care less if he hit a civilian or accidentally hurt somebody outside of his parameters.
I thought for sure you got him. Maybe I did. Maybe this is someone else. It doesn't really matter.
He was just going after Batman, and anybody in the crossfire is incidental. That's highly different to how we saw him in the very first episode. It's been a quote-unquote slow corruption, but you could say by the second episode that he appeared, he was already like this, and he was moving on that kind of timing. Shriek ultimately has become a fundamentally different character by the time that we see him right here near the end. And that is cool, and that is fun. It makes for great, character development. But at the same time, I do feel like he's a little bit flanderized, and again, that comes down to his treatment as villain of the week by the time we get here. He's no longer the original new kid on the block. He's just another villain that Batman takes down. And getting back to the kid getting caught, well, he is annoying and he is inconsistent in the way in which he views villains. He's at least keeping it real with Shriek.
Tell me.
Maybe I don't owe Batman anything, but I sure don't owe you anything either.
Wrong. You're about to owe me your life, but only if you take me to him.
I mean, Shriek is just out here on some casual shit talking about, yeah, I'll just kill you if you don't tell me where Batman is. Like, dog, that's a kid. I know he's an annoying kid, but man, that's a kid. Either way, Shriek ends up blowing his way through the Gotham River, something the kid had mentioned earlier, because he's got knowledge of the tunnels. He led him there specifically because at the end of the day, even though this kid has quote-unquote idolized villains, he's only done so because he feels disenfranchised himself, and when presented with a character such as Batman, who goes out of his way to help him and to try and get him to do better things, the kid changes his ways because ultimately he was just angry. And this episode ends in one of the most anticlimactic ways possible, because instead of getting a fight between Batman and Shriek gets his ass kicked by an old Bruce Wayne with a cane. Yes, Bruce Wayne with a cane absolutely dog-walks Shriek after Shriek has repeatedly dog-walked Batman. I don't even know how to describe how disappointed I was. Yes, that does make Batman look cool, and Bruce is still cool, but I was so disappointed because this is it. Outside of the fact that Shriek appears one more time, and that's in Justice League Unlimited during the episode Epilogue, something I've already covered on this channel. But he appears on Epilogue just to get his ass kicked by Batman, and that's it. I mean, I can now kind of see why he's probably underrated, because this, the last few times he's been shown, not exactly putting on his best effort. But for those 2 episodes, man, he was moving like prime LeBron out here with new powers, different creative uses of his powers, the ability to amplify sound, the idea that he loses his sound makes it a benefit and then gets punished for said benefit because he's a cocky ass word I can't say. Either way, he was really enjoyable, and in my opinion, Shriek is the most underrated Batman Beyond villain because he's just treated so terribly by the end of his tenure. But hey, that happens with cartoons that end up being long-running like this one. Okay, YouTuber time. If you liked the video, please leave a like. It helps out the channel a lot. If you dislike the video, that's cool. Dislike it, then leave a comment down below of why you dislike the video. Constructive criticism helps me to be a better creator for each and every one of you. As well, I do run a Patreon, in which for $1 a month, you can support me as a content creator, help me make these videos, help me make them faster. As well, you can see these videos unedited, so no copyright changes I make for YouTube, as well as seeing them early. And if you're in the $5 or above tier, I shout your name out at the end of each and every one of these videos. So shout out Demetrius Youngblood, shout out Metal Monk, shout out West Belladonna, shout out Oscar, shout out Megan, shout out Mark Frosty 13, shout out Gabriel Lafonte, Transgers1, Video Gamer 75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Ross and Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing. Hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.